Nicole is the NGA Deputy Director for Maritime Safety. Has been in that role since September 2017. She leads more than 300 maritime experts who provide premier safety of navigation products and services. She has a great background, including as Director of the Integrated Collection Office, so a true multi-ent, cross-ent background. Nicole?
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by introducing the panelists. Guy Thomas is the Science Advisor for the Multinational Maritime Security Center of Excellence. He was also the former U.S. Science and Technology Advisor for Maritime Domain Awareness from 2003 to 2012. On contract with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, S&T as their SME for space, and has been awarded the Distinguished Career Service Award and the U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Foundation's Individual Achievement Award as well. So certainly very well qualified. Also, we have Pieter Malinowski, who is the head of Information Fusion Center at the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. Initially spent time with the Polish Armed Forces, also with NATO's Joint Forces Command Headquarters in the Netherlands. He joined the European Border and Coast Guard Agency in 2010, taking responsibility for development of services related to information exchange and situational awareness. So thank you both for joining us. I would just like for the audience to first define maritime domain awareness and explain a little bit why it's important before turning it over to the panelists. I'm going to read this part because it is an actual definition. I don't want to get it wrong. But the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, defines maritime domain awareness as the effective understanding of anything associated with the maritime domain that could impact the security, safety, economy, or environment. And the maritime domain itself is defined as all areas and things of, on, under, relating to, adjacent to, or bordering on a sea, ocean, or other navigable waterway, including all maritime-related activities such as infrastructure, people, cargo, and vessels, and other conveniences. So you can understand with that definition, not only does it include the 71% of the Earth's surface covered by water, but it also includes all the adjacent land. So given that, the topic and the importance of this topic cannot be overstated. So it's important both from a military and an economic perspective. More than 10 billion tons of physical cargo relies on commercial shipping to reach its market every single year. And from a military perspective, while a C-17 Galaxy aircraft can carry an M1 Abrams tank, a single ship can carry more than 100 tanks and tracked vehicles and more than 900 other vehicles, or in other words, an entire U.S. Army task force on a single ship. So that gives you some idea of scale of importance of this particular topic. So I'd like to first turn it over to Guy for his introductory comments.
Thank you very much. Let's see, we have
Over there.
We have to turn around and see our slides. Oh, there they are.
Yes.
All right. C Sigma, Collaboration in Space for International Global Maritime Awareness. When I invented satellite AIS, almost immediately 10 different organizations from 6 different nations, Canada, Norway, Germany, France, Italy, and Japan, all came to see me and said, we'd like to partner with you in building a space-based maritime situation awareness system. You didn't have to be the sharpest knife in the drawer to say, geez, guys, rather than building 7 different systems, those 6 plus the United States, which is what I was trying to do, let's build one great one. And I came up with the term C Sigma to express that. I'm still trying. That was in 2004. It's 15 years later. It's still a good idea. The problem statement. I've seen this problem statement many, many times since 2001. We can't do it by ourselves. The United States on its best day, and I'm a proud American. I'm worse than that, I'm a proud Texan. I realize we can't do this, guys. We need everybody's help. I see several Japanese friends in Italian friends, several Canadians that I've worked with. we all need to do this together. Because it's global maritime security is what we're really looking for. Maritime situation awareness is, in most definitions, a regional problem. So I've coined a new phrase, global maritime awareness is what we're really looking for, because it's global security is what we want. Basically, global maritime awareness is where three global commons converge. There are four global commons. There's the maritime commons that's thousands of years old. There's the air, which is just over 100 years old. There's space, which is just over 50 years old. And there's cyber, which is really 20 years, give a number. I studied computer science several times in my life, about 10 years apart. And each time I had to restart because it has exploded. And I haven't studied it now in 20 years, and I'm sure I'm way out of touch. But it's the advancements in the last two, space and cyber, that makes global maritime awareness an actual possibility today. Global maritime awareness. We are at the crest of a tidal wave of space systems in the commercial domain. I worked for the NRO and NSA for a good part of my career back in the 70s and 80s, and we dreamed of the systems at the national level, at the classified level, that were going to be available for us, that are available for us today, and within the next 5 years are going to be even better. Hawkeye 360 now puts out a SIGINT system. There's other people competing with them. Satellite AIS now gives you your location and pattern of life of what's happening at sea. Synthetic aperture radars are getting better and better. 8 years ago, I tried to sell a synthetic aperture radar satellite that would fit in the seat of a Cessna 172. They didn't believe me. ICEYE's up there today, and others are following suit. Video systems are getting excellent. I just heard that Bill Gates, just yesterday afternoon, that Bill Gates' Space Now system has not been funded, unfortunately, which is too bad. But he had a plan to put up 300 video satellites. It would give us 360, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, video coverage of the world. That may not be coming just yet, but it is conceived. Imaging satellites, of course, we all know of the amazing systems that Digital Globe and various other people have put up, Pleiades, and there's also the lesser ones. SIGINT, I mentioned Hawkeye 360, there's a couple of others out there. When I first heard of SIGINT 360 and what they were planning to do as an NSA person, my immediate thought was, how is he going to stay out of jail? Well, they figured out a way to do it. And of course, the IoT, we all understand, and the machine-to-machine communications that rides on the low bandwidth systems gives us a huge amount of information in the maritime domain. And of course, everybody here all over this hall is talking about these things. AI, that was the whole point of the panel that was just here before us. These tools will allow us to make a great deal of sense out of and understanding out of the data and information that we're collecting with these systems. And that's really my start. I could go on and on and on, and some of you have heard me go on, but I just wanted to set the stage. We are at the edge of a huge opportunity to build a global maritime awareness system for the betterment of the world. Task number 1 of our national space policy says do that, but that was 2010, and sequestration hit right after that. It's still never been implemented, but that is the task number 1 of our national space policy. And I thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Peter?
Thank you.
Thank you. I like to talk after Guy because Well, what he was talking about, we are using that physically today in European Border and Coast Guard Agency.
Yep.
First of all, thank you for invitation to give this European perspective. President Trump is in Europe, so it seems that our alliance is still strong. I think he's doing quite good job there, so thank you again. Well, first, some facts about European Union to put things in perspective. 28 member states still. Let's hope this will stay like that. Around 500 million of citizens, so big space where we all live. 62,000 miles of EU external maritime border. Well, having such a long maritime border, at certain moment we figure out in European Union we need the agency which will start to manage that border. So we created European Union Border and Coast Guard Agency. Currently we have almost 1,000 staff members in our HQ in Warsaw, Poland, around 10,000 officers across our external border on land and sea. Well, as you can imagine, in European Union, most of our borders, internal borders, are not there anymore. You see some pictures there. On the left side, I believe it's your border with Mexico. Yeah, indeed. In the middle, you see border between Poland and Germany. You remember 70 years ago, we were fighting together. Right now, you can cross this border and you don't even recognize that you are in Poland or in Germany. Of course, having internal borders not there anymore, we need to focus on our external borders because, in fact, main role of European Border and Coast Guard Agency is to protect our external border, making sure that inside we can move freely, but everybody who would like to enter our common space shall be checked against certain rules. Because topic of this panel is space collaboration, well, this slide is showing our approach to maritime border protection. Really first step today is based on space observation. We are using SAR radars, we are using optical images, we are using satellite AIS, we are using all available sources and sensors on board satellites to detect threats which sooner or later can pop up on our borders, external borders. You see this slide, closer we are to shore, then we start to use a little different tools. But the first, and how we define that the first technology that shall be used far away from our borders shall be based on satellite sensors. And many of those sensors Guy was talking about are used today. Mm-hmm. Some examples where we use satellite-based capabilities to build our services. Vessel monitoring and tracking, that's obvious one, based on satellite AIS, LRIT data. We can track a lot of objects of our interest, especially if we talk about cross-border crime activities. Well, some of them sometimes turn off AIS transponders. Well, for us, that's also information. If we combine that with pictures from SAR sensors on board satellites, we can clearly detect them and monitor them. Anomaly detection on AIS traffic, very interesting area where basically changes generated by AIS can clearly define that there is something wrong with the specific object of interest. For instance, change in the speed, sudden stop, or any other factor that might be unusual from normal behavior of the vessel. That's a signal for the operator that there might be something interesting. Here, satellite AIS plays a significant role in the service. Vessel detection, that's a combination of satellite AIS, LRIT, fishing vessel monitoring systems, together with SAR radars. Basically, we scan certain areas of the sea. We combined SAR image with positions of the vessels from satellite AIS and LRIT. And if the object is not identified based on the data from ship reporting systems. Then we send a plane or drone to check what is this object doing, why this object is on SAR image, and why this object is not sending any signal on the transponder. Well, example of vessel detection service, we use this service mainly to detect this kind of boats, small rubber boats with migrants on board. So far, using a combination of satellite AIS, SAR images, we were able to save thousands of people trying to get to Europe on boats like that. That's, on this boat, we have around 50 people, including kids. They were saved using this capability. Well, another example where we use vessel tracking service based on AIS data, and this example is using anomaly detection. Basically, at a certain moment, our operators were notified that there is something wrong on satellite AIS data with specific vessel. Basically, a signal node was popping up in different areas. There were certain spoofing activities also. At the end of the day, after many days of different analysis, different observations, we asked, in this case, Greek special forces to board this vessel, and it was a very good hit. Almost 5 million euro goods were seized there, so very interesting story. Well, that's a perspective. I think we'll have more discussion about that during the panel, so thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think you've both done a really good job of explaining the breadth of the issue. So given all of that, Pioter, I'll pose the first question to you and say, where should international governmental partners and private sector organizations focus their partnership efforts, given the breadth of possibilities here? Where are the areas you think we should focus first?
Well, there are a couple of elements. First of all, there is a need of having trust between public and private sector. And that trust has to be developed through close cooperation and definition of common goals. Well, we know that sometimes private sector and government organizations, those goals are not in line. But I think that what we have to do and what we are doing at least, and I know also here in the US, but in European Union, we are trying to embrace private sector and try to define certain common objectives. We will never share all the objectives because private sector is here to earn money at the end of the day. It's not non-profit organization. But we have a set of common goals, so that's extremely important. We have to treat each other as partners, define those common objectives, and then work towards them. Well, that sometimes if we define those objectives, we can figure out that certain developments cannot be taken by private sector itself. Basically, they will never pay off. So from that perspective, we need to have a government support, financial support to certain developments. Good example how we did that in European Union is a Copernicus program. Copernicus program was started many years ago, and the reason for that was that in the past, European Union, we had to buy a satellite data from providers outside of EU. Basically, we had to go to US, to Japan, to China, or to India, and buy a data from satellites. We decided, well, that's not the best approach. So we started to discuss with private sector how we can build European Union capability in respect to space observation programs. And private sector came back to us and they said, well, this is something that will never pay off purely from financial perspective. So the only way we can have European Union space Earth observation capabilities is to have a partnership where you, as a government, in this case European Union government, put some money on the table, to make it simple. And we decided to do it. And today, European Union is one of the biggest producer of Earth observation data. We have 5 European Union satellites purely dedicated to climate change, to SAR observation. Good example of how it can work. Definitely, where we should put our attention is to have more sensors in space. More sensors in sense of more SAR satellites. Well, I showed you example of how SAR satellites can help to save lives in border management. Well, that was a really nice slide, but reality is that we still have a few SAR satellites available. Basically, in our region of interest, we have 2 passes of satellites per day in the morning and in the evening, but between there is nothing. So we need more small or whatever size SAR satellites, which could give us not 24/7, because that's not something that we need, but more observation times, basically more passes in the region we need. And here I see example where, again, we can put a partnership between private sector and international or European or whatever, how we define it, doesn't matter, efforts. We define those objectives, and then together we build something that can be beneficial for a global maritime situational awareness. Because those satellites, if we build them in Europe, they will not serve only Europe. You know how satellites are going around the globe, so they are not bound to Europe or to one region. So we can do it together as a global challenge. Thank you.
That's actually a good segue to a question I have for you, Guy, because given your position that you held during the time that the modern understanding of maritime domain awareness was established in the United States with President George W. Bush's Homeland Security Presidential Directive 13 in 2004, the commercial satellite industry was very different then. So given the strides that have been made in the commercial sector, there's a proliferation of not just small sats, but lots of different capabilities. So is there still a need to build a dedicated maritime domain awareness monitoring system or awareness system? Or do we just leverage existing platforms that are already circling the Earth for other missions?
One of my heroes was Winston Churchill and his science advisor. And he said during the Battle of Britain that Churchill, to his science advisor, better is the mortal enemy of good enough. And we are at the good enough point right now. Better is better, there's no doubt about it. But we could build right now, if we had a coordination center, an excellent maritime awareness system, from a space-based maritime awareness system. I am absolutely convinced of that. And I think that we ought to start by building it and then adding in these various systems that everybody has promised to come online. That is a challenge to all of us. I believe the United States should lead the way. I am a little embarrassed to say that Europe is leading the way at this time. We probably have some pretty good systems ourselves, but they're all behind a black door somewhere, and nobody's talking about them. But we have good enough systems on this side of the door, as is IMSA, which is a partner with Frontex. Frontex are the 2 best systems in the world. They're both Europe. Guess which place in the world needs it least? It's Europe, my friends. Europe needs it. But if you look at the rest of the world, we need it on our southern coast. Micronesia needs it. We need it in the South China Sea. We need it in the Indian Ocean. We need it in the Northern Pacific, Northwestern Pacific, and the Northeastern Pacific. My Canadian friends will tell you the Northeastern Pacific is a high priority because of fish theft. The Gulf of Guinea, off of Chile, Argentina, off of Peru, off of Ecuador, India. All these places need a maritime system. And if we all banded together right today using the systems that are right together, I think we would have an excellent system, but you need a traffic control cop. You need somebody to portion it out. And I actually thought, I have a signature from Barack Obama saying, build that. He signed it on the 28th of June of 2010, but we've never built it. It's a little bit frustrating, actually.
Well, so go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to add to that obviously if we build space capabilities, today building space capabilities only for maritime situational awareness, well, that might be a good approach, but in my opinion, and that opinion is also opinion of European Union, that we should try to invite all interested stakeholders.
Yeah.
And especially if we talk about SAR satellites, well, when we started Copernicus program, we were not thinking that we will use those satellites for security, for internal security purposes, or for maritime situational awareness. They were built for climate change observation.
Yeah.
And they are doing pretty good job in this area. I know that not everybody believes in climate change, but, well, in Europe, most of us, we believe in that. So they are doing pretty good job. At certain moment, we figure out, well, they can be also used for internal security purposes, something that in military was done in the past. But in civilian environment, in law enforcement and border protection, that was kind of novelty. And we figured out, well, let's work together. But still, if we talk about numbers, 70% of investments and usage of those capabilities are done outside of internal security domain. They are done by climate change, environmental folks. They are done by companies trying to figure out what is the best thing to sell, whatever. Only 30% is used today by us. So from that perspective, I think we have to team up, to answer your question, team up with all the communities, because that will reduce the price, that will make our efforts more visible for the public. It will be much easier to sell also to the public why we need such investments. As I said, those will not be private investments. There is no such a money in private market that would invest this today, because that will not pay off. So it would have to be a partnership. So we have to explain to public why we want to spend this money. Yep. And if we combine internal security with climate, with environment, I think that we will have a public opinion supporting this kind of projects.
And resource protection.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You have four things: security, safety, environmental protection, and resource protection. They call it also economic protection. I'm not saying that any one is greater than the other. They're all the same. And they're all the same systems. Satellite AIS, radar satellites, all. And that's why you need a traffic cop. That's why you need a coordination center. The first thing you would need to do is, what's the priority today for this satellite? And there's software that does that right now. There's people in Greenbelt, Maryland, and Rome, both that have excellent software programs that can tell you who's best for what at this moment, at this place in the world. And I'm sure there's others that have built it as well, since I've seen those briefs 2 years ago.
So on that point, gentlemen, both of you have experience with the DoD side or the military applications, but also the civil side. So how does the uncleared community of stakeholders like commercial shipping, law enforcement, environmental organizations, how do they gain access to information when so many of these satellite providers are really built and optimized for the intelligence mission, and so many of the platforms provide classified data sets? So how do we make that jump and leverage those capabilities for the uncleared community and more of the safety and border protection mission?
The best use of satellite AIS that I've seen yet today is the Italian government uses AIS to track all the ships in the Mediterranean. And then they've got an excellent radar system, Cosmos SkyMed, that images the satellite, images the Mediterranean every day, and they figure out who's polluting, who is pumping their bilges illegally. And AIS gives you the name and next port of call of that track. And pollution in the Mediterranean has been cut, according to the Italian Navy, by 50% because of that in the last 10 years, because now the word is out among most of the mariners that go in the Mediterranean that if you pump your bilges in the Mediterranean, you're probably going to be caught. And the first fine is $350,000. And it goes up from there for your second and third fines. So it's self-polluting. Global Fishing Watch has gotten money from several charities now. They do an excellent job of detecting who's illegally fishing using just satellite AIS. By the way, satellite AIS gives you the pattern of life. You have to have all these other systems, including helicopters and patrol planes and everything else, to be the pouncers. And that's where some of these people who maybe cannot afford satellites, but can afford to be able to prosecute if in their own waters.
Yeah, I will add to that. You know, I remember 10 years ago when I was in Allied Command Transformation, Norfolk, Virginia. You know, we had, at that time I was on the military side. we had law enforcement agencies from one of the member states of EU asking for data, and our answer was, no way, we cannot give you that.
That's right.
Well, we didn't say why, we just say this is military stuff, you should not get this. Well, after a few years, I moved to civilian side, to law enforcement, and we had in Med Sea operation together with EU military staff. And I went to them and say, could you provide me a data on position of your vessels? Because we have our vessels, you have military vessels, we need to know where we are together. At the end of the day, we will not achieve our goals. They said, no way, we cannot give you because it's so strict. Then I showed them, I believe it was maritimetraffic.com. I saw the position of their vessels because they have their transponders on. From AIS, I said, we can have agreement here that if you will be doing a military task for 2-3 hours, then you don't share position with us, you turn off your transponders. But at the end of the day, if you are doing your mission, we'll know your position, for instance, from SAR images or from optical images, or even from our patrolling planes or drones which are flying in the region. So at the end of the day, today, if we talk about barriers between military and civilian use of different sensors, we have to basically figure out that nowadays, if we don't use this data source, we'll have this data from the other source, and at the end of the day, position of military vessels today is not really a classified information. I know that some military folks might say, well, this is top secret. Well, I would give you many examples where you would be surprised how top secret is that. I mean, so we have to kind of teach each other about those barriers and try to use those sensors in dual way. Cosmos Skymed, well, Italian satellites, very good. Problem is that Italian military forces are always blocking access to them. So for law enforcement use, you put order to use Cosmos Skymed, and a few hours later you have rejection because of, at the same time, military wants to use it, Italian military. So, it still doesn't work in this perfect way as you would see it, Guy.
Yeah. So just like the data is evolving and the sources are evolving, the threat is also evolving. So we have a couple questions from the audience regarding some of that evolving threat, and questions to both of you about what is being done in terms of coordination for the subsurface threat, both the manned or unmanned subsurface threat, and also the surface threat becoming smaller vessels, right? We're no longer in a state where nation-state adversaries are the main threat, where you're seeing large gray-hulled warships, but small craft, pleasure craft being repurposed with explosives and things like that. So not just the subsurface threat, but if you can comment on, do you anticipate policy changes requiring smaller vessels to carry the same type of AIS transponders and the carriage requirements being moved down to smaller classes of vessels? So anything about those?
Absolutely. In fact, the United States has had preparation to move it down to 65. Singapore has it down to 0. If you get underway with a motor on your boat, you got to have AIS on it. Orbcomm has just come up with a system that you carry with you. It's about that. It's the size of a beer can. It's this big, and it's got a little antenna on it, and it talks to 2 different satellite systems. And they're trying to sell it to every fishing boat in the world. But yes, absolutely, we're taking it down. The underwater threat, I served in submarines. I know how difficult the underwater problem is. I'm not aware of any space system that is counter to the underwater threat. I work with DHS right now. That's what exactly we were looking on, is exactly how small we can pick up the drug runners coming across the Gulf of Mexico and coming up the west coast of the United States. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, the issue here is that if US will do your regulation job done, even if we do it on the other side of Atlantic, that EU will pass a regulation that will require that small vessels, or every vessel has to have a transponder on board, well, that will not solve the issue, because we are still talking about international waters. Only global initiative and global regulation, changes to global regulations, maritime law, which will require that basically every single vessel, regardless of the size, shall have satellite AIS on board, and this satellite AIS is turned on all the time. That would kind of help us. Of course, then we have other issues like AIS spoofing, GPS
Scrambling,
issues.
yeah.
Exactly, scrambling and other things. But the first thing is that we need to have to come back to partners in IMO, in other organizations, and start to discuss in UN also how to change maritime law in the direction, as I said. Well, that will not be easy because those discussions are ongoing behind the scene, and there are many countries which are not in favor of that for various reasons. That's not the time to discuss that.
So I guess on the other side of the continuum from international maritime law is more of the crowdsourced approach. So there's a question here referencing citizen-led observations in the fisheries monitoring environment. Also, there's citizen-led monitoring of North Korean missiles, for instance, or humanitarian issues in Africa. So what do either of you see? This was specifically for Guy, but if either of you have thoughts on this, what do you see as the role of citizen advocacy in maritime domain awareness?
Well, that's a good question. I think that there are software programs out there right today that bring in social media, and anybody who's got a cell phone can contribute. But when you're talking offshore, it has to be satellite-based or aircraft-based, and an aircraft is a lot more expensive than a satellite in the long run. So, yeah, detecting when people leave ports, that can be a help, and that can be an input to it. But as I said, in Singapore, and I think Mexico is getting ready, India has already, and I think Mexico is getting ready to, if you come from more than 12 miles out and you're approaching their shores, you better have your transponder on or we seize your boat. And that's one way to get around it. But as Pioter said, it's going to require coordination, probably at the United Nations. Certainly a collaboration of the willing led by NATO and by our Japanese partners who are very willing, and maybe India would be a very good thing to work all this together. It is. I remember hearing a German rocket scientist working on Terrasar X at a conference in Abu Dhabi, I believe it was about 3 years ago. She said, you know, maritime domain awareness is not rocket science. It's a lot harder because there's so many more variables.
There was also part about fishery control, yes, in your question, I think.
Yeah, the person who asked the question referenced that there's citizen-led observers.
Yeah. Well, I will give you a small anecdote about that. You know, in Europe, we have European Fishery Control Agency. Mm-hmm. And together, European Border Coast Guard Agency, together with European Fishery Control Agency, we have so-called operational activities. Basically, we are monitoring if the catch of tuna fish in Med Sea is done in proper way, etc., etc. So together with my colleague from European Fishery Control Agency, we went to Sicily, and we were having dinner there. And we were asked by the owner, guys, you want to have fresh tuna? And we said, well, yes. Well, he gave us this fresh tuna, and then we start to ask him, you know that you cannot have fresh tuna right now because that's the period where you cannot have fresh tuna. And he said, so what are you going to do with this? You are in Sicily. You have all the people there who basically live from this kind of activities. So that's not a problem of, you know, if you will have citizens involved in this. There's an entire process of education and cultural change which we have to go through. And that's a process which will, I don't want to be pessimistic, but it will take much longer than any technical developments or any, you know, build of satellites and things like that. So we have to keep that in our minds at the end of the day.
So I've saved the easy question for last with a minute each. So given 60 seconds, what would you say are the biggest policy challenges that need to be addressed?
Go ahead.
Well, I think the biggest policy challenges are related to the fact that as Guy started at the beginning, this is a global issue. We will not if you have one country or even a group of countries working together, that's not enough. We need to have majority of states globally involved in this. And then if we talk about that, obviously we start to go into different challenges because, well, there is a different, if we talk about fishery control from Japanese perspective, it looks a little differently than fishery control from Norwegian perspective. Even inside European Union, when we start to talk with Norwegian colleagues about certain fishery control arrangements, they say, well, let's stop here because that's for us extremely sensitive thing. So the biggest challenge is to finally sit together on global level and try to figure out common ground, minimal set of requirements or objectives that we want to achieve globally, and get towards them. I believe that's the biggest policy challenge we have today.
I'm reminded.
I'll give you the last 60 seconds.
Great. The last 60 seconds. I remember in 1908, when they had the first meeting, I read about this in a history book. I wasn't there. Just want to make that clear. When they had the first meeting setting up the International Air Carriers Organization, it took them 50 years to establish the kind of coordination that Pioter just recommended. I have sat in on many meetings now since literally the day after 9/11, how we talked about that exact problem. And I remember going to my boss after about 4 or 5 years and said, you know, I'm going to concentrate on the technology part of it because it's the easy part of the problem. It is the technology that's the easy part. It's how you make everybody work together and work and solve this problem that's the tough part. But it's well worth the effort, and we need to press on. We, in fact, have, as I said, task number 1 of our national space policy says build this system. And I think they started to do it and realized it was too hard and stopped it. And we need to go to the United Nations. We need to go to IMSA. We need to go to Frontex. We need to go to some of the organizations in Japan, some of the ones in Singapore and Malaysia, and use their models and work all together. It is a global problem. We need to solve it globally. And I would like to think the United States would lead the way, and I hope they will. But it is not a national security problem. It is an international security problem. And by security, I mean environment, resource, safety, and security.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate your input and your insight.